Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're glad to have you here on this chilly late summer morning. We're continuing our discussion on leadership, and this is our Leadership 2.0. We're very fortunate to have a special guest with us today. If you have any questions for Matt, any comments during his talk, please put those in the chat. I think Matt will be happy to address those at the end of his talk. Or if it's something urgent you need to ask him about, let us know in the chat and we'll get that message to Matt right away. For those of you who were lucky enough to be in our mental fitness boot camps in Jamestown and Dickinson, you got to meet Matt and hear a little bit about him and know how passionate he is about provider well-being. Matt's been in EMS for many years, 17 or 18 years, I think, Matt, now, and as an EMT and a paramedic, a flight paramedic, an operations manager in both busy urban services and some rural services. So he has a real understanding of what EMS in North Dakota is like. And so we're really grateful for you getting up this early. Matt's out on the West Coast, so 9 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Mountain, and only 7 o'clock for Matt, and he's still bright-eyed and with us, and we appreciate that a lot, Matt. So we'll just turn it over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, just for all of you to have the mental image, I was up, I don't know, probably an hour, 15 minutes ago, and getting everything ready and practicing my presentation. And of course, my kids are upstairs in bed listening to me talk about leadership to myself while I'm drinking coffee downstairs. Yeah, just thanks. I'll just start by saying thanks. I appreciate all of you logging in. I know that it's a Wednesday, it's the middle of the week. If you're anything like me, kind of the busiest part of the week is that front half, and then it kind of wanes towards the end. And so for you to just take an hour out of your day, listen to me talk about something that I'm passionate about, something that I find interesting, means a lot. So thanks for logging in, and thanks for presenting, and thanks to the association for offering the invite for me to be able to come and speak to all of you. So thanks for coming. So this is Leadership 2.0. I want to give you guys a little bit of a backstory. The backstory is I was originally invited to be part of a panel discussion, and then for whatever reason that changed, and Lynn hit me up and he goes, "Hey, can you do a presentation on leadership?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said, "What's it called?" Because it's just called Leadership 2.0. I said, "Great. Any sort of parameters or boundaries or guidelines or anything?" He said, "No, just talk leadership for 45 minutes, go from there." So I took it in a direction. He made a big mistake by not asking me for my slide deck ahead of time. So this has been unseen. This is the first time I've presented this material in this way, but certainly something that I'm really excited about. So I'm hopeful that all of you will come along with me on this journey. So we're going to hit on a couple things. I'll introduce myself, talk a little bit about my history. It's one of the things I love doing is talking about myself. Not at all. We're going to hit on kind of this concept of leadership and what it is and what it isn't. We'll hit on some really basic concepts. I'm not sure what Leadership 1.0 was, but we're going to build on some basic concepts, and then we're going to kind of go from there, talk leadership theory, talk about kind of the historical concepts of leadership and where leadership gets its foundations. We're going to talk about the modern version of leadership and what that is and what that isn't, how it shows up in our EMS organizations. We're going to talk about this concept of an X factor. So what's the one thing that all great leaders have in common? And then we're going to go from the practical to the tactical. So we're going to take those concepts, those theories, those ideas, that conversation, that discussion, and we're going to say, okay, what can I actually do today? What can I do in my agencies? What can I do with my coworkers, with my leaders, with my bosses, with my supervisors, my subordinates, whatever that looks like to you? These are going to be some real tactical things you can take away and apply to your practice literally today. And when I said earlier, they haven't seen the slide deck, I wanted to take this into a different direction, hopefully one that all of you like. I was curious if the chat was going to be open so I could see this or not, but I wanted to do it through a very specific lens. And I wanted to do it through the lens of the TV show Ted Lasso. So if you've seen the show Ted Lasso, you know that it's a phenomenal show. There's a tons of concepts of surrounding leadership and emerging leadership, but I wanted to take some of the concepts and the theories that we talk about today and apply them to what we've seen in that show. So if you've seen the show, great. You know exactly what we're talking about. It might even prompt you to go and want to rewatch the show. If you haven't seen it, that's okay. We'll explain everything along the way. We'll describe the characters, what they are, what they aren't, and then I might encourage you to go watch the show. So if you want to watch it, I think it's on Apple TV Plus or Amazon or any of those streaming services, and I don't have an affiliation with any of them, but you can go ahead and check it out. It's a great practice of leadership type show. Funny. Now I'll say this, I wanted to keep this presentation as PG as possible. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll pull some video clips from Ted Lasso. That is impossible. There's no way to pull a video clip from that television show without extreme amounts of profanity, which I know from an EMS perspective, we don't really care about, but I didn't want to bring that to the presentation today. So we've got some photos, we've got some pictures, we've got some conversation, but we'll go from there. So like Lynn said, here's a little bit about myself. I've been involved in EMS for just about 20 years. I've worked from the front line all the way up to the office. I've been a frontline EMT in Southern California, kind of moved my way up the West Coast, worked as a critical care ground paramedic, flight paramedic, both on fixed and rotor wing platforms. Over here in Oregon, and I do live on the West Coast. I'm kind of in the Portland metro area now, been here for about 2 years. But all the rural parts of the state that I worked in are considered mountainous terrain. So we're flying nighttime, over mountains, over trees, in very rural and underserved communities. I was an operations manager for a nonprofit air and ground ambulance company in Southern Oregon as well. Got to manage a flight team, multiple flight teams, a dispatch center, a training department, ground operations, and really got to take this practice of leadership, take these ideas and these concepts that I thought I heard, and apply them to managing and leading people, ideally in a positive direction. The current job I have is I work for a large ambulance organization, kind of a national organization, in the wellness division. So I do a lot of work with employees in crisis, catastrophic event response, crash response, employee death response, leveraging resources that exist for the EMS community and taking them and making them personal for people that need that support or need that help. So a lot of work with peer support and building peer support teams, a lot of work in the wellness or mental fitness realm. And so that's one of my passions. I also work as a consultant with Safe Tech Solutions, as a leadership consultant, working with EMS organizations and leaders, building their practice of leadership. When I start these presentations, I typically throw in this slide, and we're a group of EMS people. One of the things that I get in front of and I say right away is I come from the perspective of this is the absolute best career on the planet. There's nothing better than being an EMS provider. I cannot see myself doing anything different. I'm the guy that'll tell my kids, like, please go get into EMS, go be a volunteer firefighter, get your EMT, get your paramedic, do whatever you have to do while you're young. But there's so much coolness, and I know I'm not being very articulate, but there's something so great about being able to serve your communities. It's fun, it's exciting, there's adventure, there's a sense of community, there's a sense of identity. It is the absolute best job on the planet. Best career on the planet, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I also believe that this career has this unique opportunity, and this is the wellness version of Matt. I believe this career has a unique opportunity to make our lives better. So because of the work we do in EMS, I believe it makes us better people outside of EMS. So it makes me a better father, a better husband, a better partner, whatever that looks like to all of you. But I'd like to make this agreement. If we're going to have a real conversation surrounding leadership or surrounding wellness or surrounding any of these topics, we have to be able to be real with each other. I can't come into you and give you this very polished, perfect, articulate presentation and expect you not to like raise the eyebrow and give me the EMS like stare of like, is this dude for real? So here's our agreement. We're going to have a real conversation. We're going to talk about real things, and that I believe adds strength to the concepts that we're talking about, specifically in leadership. This picture was taken just about 2 miles from my home. This was on my commute, taking my kids to school. This is on the garbage truck here in the city, and they have a little bit of a sense of humor, as you can see. So if we were to Google leadership, and this is where we start with those really basic concepts, if we were to Google leadership and look at the kind of the largest corporate consulting firm's definition of leadership, McKinsey & Co., you would see that they define leadership as the set of behaviors used to help people align their collective direction to execute strategic plans and to continually renew an organization. And if you're anything like me, you probably fell asleep as I was describing that definition to you. That doesn't feel very real for EMS type people. That doesn't feel real to me. Execute strategic plans, that's not what I do. The tones go off and I respond. And so this definition for me feels really flat. So I want to propose a new definition, and this is the one there on the bottom. Leadership is defined as the art and science of utilizing influence to guide an individual or a group in a specific direction or achievement of a goal. So, a little wordy, but let's break it down. The art and science. So the art of leadership. Art requires finesse. It requires attention. It requires time. There's this really wonderful documentary on, I can't remember what streaming platform it is, but it's about the Beatles, and it's about them writing the Get Back album. The documentary is 8 hours long. They're creating the group, the Beatles. If you haven't heard of them, Google them. This group is creating one of the best albums. They're rock stars. They're creating music. And you watch this documentary, and it's the most boring documentary you've ever seen in your life. It's 8 hours of just sitting through it, and you're literally watching them create this in real time. It's slow. It's methodical. It's fine-tuned. There's a lot of conversation, and that's what goes into the art. Leadership is a long game. You can't walk into the room and slam your fist on the desk and say, this is the way we're going to do it, and expect that to really have the impact of playing the long game when it comes to leadership. So there's this art surrounding this idea of leadership. Now, the science behind it, there's a significant amount of evidence and research surrounding leadership practices and an effective use of human capital. And if you're interested in what that research and what that science looks like, there's peer-reviewed journals that exist just specifically for the concepts of leadership. If you want a dilution of what that looks like, you can check out like HBR, the first several pages of every magazine that HBR puts out quarterly is kind of a summary of all the emerging science surrounding leadership. So there's a combination of both. But let's break it down even further. So really, what is leadership? Well, leadership appears in our lives every single day. So I'll give you an example. This literally happened last night. I, as a father of a 6-year-old boy, wanted to lead him to bed at a particular time. I wanted him to go to bed. I wanted to get him moving in a specific direction, and that specific direction was to his bedroom with an achievement of a goal. The achievement of the goal is go to sleep. It's a school night. You need to go to sleep. So I'm the leader, and I'm trying to get my follower, my son, heading in a specific direction with the achievement of goal. Right? Now, there's two perspectives on that. There's me as the leader, and there's him as the follower. So leadership is not good or bad. You notice I didn't put in like a positive goal or a successful goal or achievement of a KPI or anything like that. We just talked specifically about achievement of a goal. So there's good leaders and there's bad leaders. So from my son's perspective, he's sitting there and he goes, well, this stinks. This is bad. I'm being led in a bad direction because I don't want to go to bed. I want to stay up and, play Legos or whatever that is. But for me, I'm like, hey, it's the end of the day. I've been a 6-year-old boy before. I know that you're tired. I know it's the first week of school and you got to get a good night's sleep. So I'm leading him in a specific direction or goal. So leadership appears in our lives in all various different facets, honestly, on a daily basis, probably multiple times per day for all of you. One of the other basic concepts that we discuss quite a bit is this idea of leader versus manager. And there's really no, and when we discuss this, when I do this presentation, when I talk about leader versus manager in group discussion or in person, there's a lot of conversation surrounding what is good and what is bad. Oftentimes we hear people say, management is bad. Managers are bad. I'd argue differently. I don't think one is bad or good. I think you need a combination of both. So if we want to be someone who establishes direction, vision, mission, values, core values, things like that, that's typically the leader, right? If we're someone who needs to plan, budget, spend, review equipment, things like that, it's more of a kind of a manager type role. Organizing people, scheduling, staffing, putting people on ambulances to go run calls, looking at a schedule, approving time off, that's a management duty. I'd argue that's incredibly important. Solving problems, maybe a little bit of both, leader and manager. Motivates, I'd say a little bit of both. Depending on the tool that they use to motivate, arguably both the leader and the manager is a motivator within the role. But the real question we think of is, what do we default to? So when times are tough, when we're busy, right? This is for me, it's 7:15 in the morning. I've got an inbox full of emails. I know today is going to be a busy day. Just while we're talking in the last 14 minutes, I've got 2 beeps on my phone of meetings that I've been scheduled for that I wasn't planning on. The day is filling up. So for me, what am I going to default to? And most people, and what the evidence shows is that most people default to that manager role. And why is that? Well, the manager role is task oriented, right? So if we're going to plan, budget, and spend, I'm going to look at capital expenses. What does a gurney cost? How can I afford that? Well, let's say I want to go with power load or a power cot. What is that going to cost me? How would I budget that in? How do I spend that? What's my reimbursement looking like right now? Those are busy things that keep us busy throughout the day. I also think there's an optic perspective too. So let's say I go to my boss today, and my boss goes, hey, and think about this for yourselves. You go to your boss today. Your boss says, hey, Matt, how was your day today? I go, it was really busy. Well, what'd you do? Well, listen, so first thing I did is I reviewed our quarterly budget. Then I went and looked at our response time compliance, and we're just hovering about 92%, which is really good. But I'm looking at the scheduling over the next week, and I see that there's a lot of people on PTO. And you know our rule about always approving PTO. So we're never going to go ahead and deny that PTO. So we're probably going to have some scheduling issues next week. So I'm working on filling the schedule now. I've also got some key meetings with stakeholders. I got a lunch with a local trauma system coordinator, and then I got a meeting this afternoon with the state. That sounds very busy. There's no leadership in there. There's a lot of management in there. I'm managing tasks. I'm managing duties. I'm checking things off my list. Now, let's say I have that same conversation with my boss. Hey, Matt, how's your day looking? I'm really busy today. I'm going to read an article, and then I'm going to sit and I'm going to think about that for quite a bit. And I'm going to think about that article and really what that means. And then I'm probably going to go walk in the ambulance bay. And I know that, Medic 257 is coming on duty here at 10 a.m. So I'm going to go ahead and make a point to be out there and have a cup of coffee with them. And then we're going to chat for quite a bit. And then I'm probably going to come back to the office for a little bit and maybe look through a couple emails, for 15, 20 minutes. Those are leadership type tasks. I'm building connections with people, I'm fostering relationships. They're equally as important, but it doesn't feel very busy. I would argue that both of those scenarios are equally important, but they just look and feel a little bit different. So when we default, when we want to fill our plates up, we typically default with those management type duties. First thing you can do to kind of mitigate that is just bring awareness to it, right? So bringing awareness to those management duties or those manager duties or those leadership duties is kind of the first step in mitigating that response, not being overwhelmed with one or the other. Arguably, though, we need both to have successful workplaces, and I'll give you an example. So this here is a picture of a garden you might find in the Pacific Northwest. You can tell that because there's some dense foliage behind it, there's a lot of shade, and it looks like they're only growing lettuce and kale because that's the only thing that grows up here. And this is kind of what my wife's garden would like to look like. So I'll use this example. So if my wife comes to me and she says, hey, honey, I want to build a garden. I want to build a garden that has all kinds of green. I want to grow elephant kale, and I want to grow broadleaf lettuce, and I want to grow iceberg. And then I also want to have some beets and some onions and some tomatoes. And then I want to grow pineapple too. While we're talking about it, I really love tropical fruit. So I want to get some mangoes in there too, maybe some citrus. I want to have this big, beautiful garden. And I think of how amazing it's going to be to have fresh produce all year round. Isn't this going to be wonderful? Like, what a wonderful, it's just going to make our family so much better. I'm so excited about that. Is that a leader, a manager, or a worker? That's a leader. She's inspiring. She's inspiring me to head towards a specific goal. That specific goal is we're going to have this bounty of food, right? We're going to have this wonderful bounty of food all year long. She's inspired me. She's motivated me to head towards a particular direction or goal. Now I go, okay, well, hold on. Citrus isn't growing here, number one. Like, no one's growing pineapples in the Pacific Northwest, so that's out. Our growing season is from about the end of May to maybe the end of September, best case scenario. So we've got to grow stuff that grows really fast. And besides that, I don't have raised beds. And if I do have raised beds, what kind of wood am I going to use? Am I going to use pressure treated 2x6s, or am I going to use just some knotty pine? Am I going to use Trex? Am I going to use some sort of composite? Do I want to sink them into the ground? What type of soil do I want to use? Do I want to use a 50-50 mix? Am I looking to have some sort of a bedrock? What are we going to do for irrigation? I'm looking at all the specifics. She has this goal or vision, and she's saying, I want to do this thing. And I'm going, well, here's how we accomplish that goal or vision. Here's the tasks we have to do. So am I the manager? Yes. I'm managing, I'm working on the processes, I'm budgeting, I'm planning, I'm spending. I'm the one who's working through the specifics of achieving that goal. Are we working in tandem? Are we any less important? Am I less important than her, or her less important than me? Not at all. We talk about the worker. So am I going to go out there? Am I going to move, 10 yards of dirt to this garden? Maybe. Yeah, I think a little bit. But who else is going to do it? My kids, right? So my kids are going to grab a wheelbarrow. They're going to grab shovels. They're going to haul stuff out there. Are they really the ones who do they even care about what type of wood am I going to use? No, not at all. They want to get the job done. Are they going to enjoy this bounty of food? Absolutely, right? So we have our workers as well. So you have leaders, managers, and workers, and they kind of blend. There's kind of overlapping circles of the Venn diagram of responsibilities of these three different roles. And neither one is bad and neither one is good. Hopefully that makes sense. So what does this look like in our Ted Lasso world, right? We have leaders and we have managers. Well, there's one person in the television show who is an excellent person at executing, at planning, at working on staffing, at working on strategy. They're always in front of that whiteboard. They're always there saying, I want to move this person here. I want to move this person here. They don't have much personality. They're down in the books, constantly reading on new and innovative ideas. They're looking at old ideas to see if they're new again. There's one person who kind of falls into that typical manager role. And I can't see the chat, but I'll just say this. That person is Coach Beard. So Coach Beard, right? Ted rarely is creating strategy. Our protagonist, Ted Lasso, the coach, the kind of lovable fish out of water, he's not creating real strategy. He's in there talking to his team. He's motivating. He's trying to get them to be their best versions of themselves, right? He says that in season 1. My goal is to make these young men the best versions of themselves. It has nothing to do with winning or losing. On the other hand, you have Coach Beard here, who's consumed with strategy and execution. He's not there to inspire. He doesn't give motivational speeches. He doesn't have this kind of strong personality that people are drawn to want to follow. He's not particularly articulate. He's just the person that handles the logistics, and without him, nothing would happen. They wouldn't get to the bus on time. They wouldn't get to the places they need to be. They wouldn't have the right staffing on the field, right? I'm kind of blending the EMS terms and the soccer terms as well. The very first example, the very first episode, I'll give you an example, and this is one of those episodes you can watch for free, I think, on Apple TV. But in the first episode, they're on the plane and they're flying over, and you see Ted in the seat, and he's very excited. And then you see Coach Beard behind him. Ted is talking about all of this wonderful stuff. He actually says, the stuff I don't know about football could fill 2 internets, right? And then in the back seat of the plane, or in the seat behind him, Coach Beard is there literally reading a book about the strategies of football as they're going over there. So Ted, no preparation. He's the inspirer. He's the leader. And then you've got Coach Beard, who's working through the logistics on the other side. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's log into the next section here, leadership theory. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. Leadership kind of has this long historical context, and we're not going to get into all the various different leadership theories, but I want to hit on a couple to be able to describe what they look like and where they come from. So the very first one we're going to talk about is this theory called the great man theory. The great man theory, and kind of arguably the first leadership theory, is that leaders are born to be leaders. They're born with it, right? Whatever that it factor is. They're not created. Their skills cannot be learned. They're just someone who is in the right place at the right time and the right person. So these are our Lincolns. These are our Julius Caesars, Alexander the Great. I mean, he literally has the great in his name throughout history. These are the type of people, and what kind of leadership theorists and psychologists and philosophers kind of describe is, there's no other way to describe it other than they're just good, articulate, important people, and for whatever reason they lead. We see that on the positive side of history. We see that on the negative side of history, right? So Genghis Khan, great man theory. Hitler in World War II, great man theory, right? People just kind of attributed their rise to power, their positions as leaders, especially in a negative way, tied to this great man theory. what they found, and this theory was kind of created in the late 1800s, what we found is that that's not really necessarily true. So that naturally transitioned into this idea of a trait theory. The trait theory was first proposed in the late 1800s as well. And basically the trait theory said effective leaders have specific traits that make them good leaders. So they're charismatic, they're competent, they have business acumen, they're motivators, they're great public speakers, they can tell a wonderful story, they can hold an audience, they make you feel safe, whatever that is. But there's a trait that they have that makes them the good leader. So we're looking at Abraham Lincoln here, right? He was a great orator, arguably really ineffective at politics. Like, he failed more political careers than he had successful ones, but we think about the successful ones, him as the 16th president. But he was a wonderful orator. He could hold a crowd with the way he delivered a speech. Kind of the modern version of the great man or the trait theory is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, from all intents and purposes, brilliant, right? But he had specific traits that made him a great leader. If someone were to copy those traits, and let's say we copy those traits, so let's say you're brilliant at EMS systems, but you can't hold a conversation, you're not going to be an effective leader, right? So this theory of the great man theory, you're born with it, or the trait theory, you can just mirror the traits of people who are great leaders, kind of got thrown out the door. But in our story of Ted Lasso, we also see someone who kind of embodies this great man theory. So for those of you that have seen the show, I encourage you to kind of think about this, but who in our series do we think is the great man, or the great man theory of leaders when we discuss that? And there's a hint in his name that he gives himself. He literally tells himself he's great. In the name he gives himself, we're talking about Nate the Great. So Nate Shelley, who's the assistant coach on Ted Lasso's team, leaves the team, and this isn't much of a spoiler, but he goes to coach his other team, and you can see a picture of it. He's wearing a different uniform here, but he leaves because he believes he's so good at it. He was born for it. He's the smartest person in the room. He believes that he has all the traits and all the competence and all the charisma and all of those things that are needed to be a great leader. And what we find is that yes, he might have a winning team, but he's really ineffective as a leader. So as we move from those historical leadership theories, we kind of move into three main modern leadership theories. They're up here on the screen now. Those are transactional, servant, and transformational. So transactional leaders, very simply, these are the leaders that utilize rewards and punishments, right? So these are the leaders that say, if you do this, then this will happen. Transactional leadership is kind of also known as managerial leadership. It's a leadership style where leaders really rely on those rewards and punishments to achieve optimal job performance, specifically from their subordinates. It's kind of based on this idea of exchange. So the example I would use in non-EMS world is a sports coach. So a sports coach, if you win, then you get the pizza party, right? If you make it through the season, then you get the trophy. And I'm thinking of that because I have little kids and they get trophies for everything. There's a whole room full of trophies. In the EMS world, what does that look like? For us, those transactional leaders typically are those really binary black and white type leaders. If you show up to work with that top button unbuttoned, then you will get written up. If you show up to work with it buttoned and you perform your job well, then you will get a performance raise or incentive raise, at the end of the year, end of the quarter. So those types of leaders are transactional in nature. Every action produces a reaction. The problem, I don't want to say the problem, but basically this theory exists on the idea that all employees and all people are only solely motivated through intrinsic rewards. So for me, hey Matt, I want you to show up to work every single day, do your job, clock in on time, clock out on time, and at the end of the year, you're going to get a 3% cost of living increase, and you're also going to get a 2% raise. If I do this, then this will happen. That solely assumes that I'm motivated strictly on that intrinsic reward of getting a raise, right? So the next idea, kind of the most popular one specifically in EMS, is this idea of servant leadership. So servant leadership is kind of this people first version of leadership. So people first, we focus on service, we focus on support. As you can imagine, there's some parallels with EMS and the work we do. Servant leadership at its core kind of has this faith-based or religious-based context. That was kind of where it was originally popularized. But it's grown into all of these different realms as far as putting our people first. It promotes personal growth. It's kind of there's some parallels to parenting, as you can quite imagine. It's this philosophy where an individual has to interact with other people, either as a manager, a subordinate, or a peer, kind of in that organizational hierarchy. And what they're trying to do is achieve referent authority. So they're not saying, hey, listen to me because I'm the boss. They're saying, trust me and listen to me because you see something in me and I'm here to support you and I'm here to help you grow as an individual or as a person. In EMS, where do we see that? I personally have seen that quite a bit with frontline supervisors. So these are people that have still kind of done the job, or just recently did the job, or when staffing is kind of low, still get out there and do the job. These are the people that have no problem lacing up the boots and going out and running calls. They show people that they're still part of the team in the sense that, yeah, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do the same thing as you. I'm going to cover you. I'm not too far removed from the position. And the really good ones put their people first. Hey, I had a difficult call. I need just 30 minutes to just catch my breath, wrap this chart up. We've been slammed lately. Can I do that? Yeah, of course. I'm going to go ahead and manipulate the system, our system staffing, whatever, to give you a little bit of a break. These are the supervisors where you'll see them. There's always someone in their office. There's always someone in their office talking with them. They rarely get work done because they're too busy talking with people. They're too busy supporting their staff. So servant leadership kind of typically shows up in that way within our EMS organizations. Outside of EMS, those are kind of the religious leaders. I think of like John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King. John F. Kennedy famously said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That's servant leadership in a nutshell, right? Our last one is transformational leadership. So transformational leadership inspires a vision, right? We're motivating our staff with change. So in our example of this garden that I gave you earlier, my wife is that transformational leader. She's showing me that we can take where we're at and we can transform ourselves into this place we want to be. I don't know the path to get there. I don't know all the specifics of how we're going to get there. I don't know which nail goes in which hole and what type of wood we're going to use. I just know that at the end of this journey, at the end of this process, we're going to have a really beautiful garden. So these are our transformational leaders in EMS. These are the ones who say, hey, I'm a visionary, if they ever say this, like I'm a visionary CEO, head for the hills, right? Just get out of there. But let's say you have someone who's an inspirational leader, CEO, COO, operations chief, department chief, battalion chief, whatever that looks like to all of you. And there's someone that goes, hey, listen, there's this really cool thing. It's called mobile integrated healthcare. It's pretty neat. I like the idea of us, serving our communities in their homes. Maybe they don't need to be transported by ambulance. Maybe we don't need to take every single patient that calls 911 in an ambulance to the emergency room. Maybe there's an idea where we can take them somewhere else. Maybe there's an idea where we leave them at home and we follow up with them a day later. We call them later on the phone and check in on them. What if there's this idea where maybe we don't even send an EMT there, we just send a paramedic in a Subaru Outback and they bring their med kit with them and they just do an assessment. I don't know how we're going to get paid for it. I don't even know if anyone wants this, but just imagine the level of service that we could provide to our community if we were able to accomplish something like this. They're describing this vision. They're saying like, hey, there's this thing that can make our community better, that can make us better serve our community. I don't know how to get there. I don't know what it means to get there, but I know it's going to be really cool when we get there, and I'm going to encourage you along the way. That's the transformational leader in a nutshell. Now, when we kind of do this, our leadership by lasso approach, when we look at the transactional leaders of the television show, there's one that really stands out to me. He's a antagonist in the show. He's kind of the bad guy, so to speak. He runs a rival football team, but he very clearly, if you watch the show, when he wins, when his team wins, he treats everyone a very specific way, and when the team loses, he treats everyone a completely different, very specific way. And for us, that's Rupert. So Rupert, and that's just like the typical bad guy pose, right? So in the show, you'll see that when he wins, when West Ham wins, that he treats Nate really well, right? And when they lose, he doesn't even talk to them. The transaction is, if you win, you get my respect. If you lose, you don't. That's the transactional approach to leadership from this very specific example. Now let's go to servant leadership. So who are our servant leaders in the television show, Ted Lasso? who was doing the job, who isn't afraid to get back out there and do the job. If maybe they're a little old, maybe they're a little outdated, maybe they don't know the protocols as well, or they don't know the techniques and the techniques of the game as well as they used to. Who are the ones that get out there and perform in that servant leadership? And for us in the show, it's Roy Kent. So Roy Kent in season 1, he's still on the team. And kind of slowly through time, he promotes into kind of this coaching role, this mentoring role, but he's still not afraid to get back out there and do the job. He motivates, he inspires, he's people first. He looks at people, he gets to know those people, and then he figures out what they need to be motivated. He has a very particular style. None of it is workplace appropriate. There's a lot of grunting and profanity, but he has a very specific style for being a servant leader. I think when you watch the show, if you haven't seen it already, you'll see some parallels with how we function as EMS. And now for our transformational leader. Of course, if you haven't guessed this by now, it's the main character of the show, Ted Lasso, right? So Ted is our transformational leader. He is the one who's inspiring people to move forward in a particular goal. At no point during the series does he say he wants to win. He's excited when they do win. He's very excited to be part of a winning team, but he doesn't lose motivation. He doesn't get uninspired when they lose. In the very first episode, or in the very first game, I should say, the team loses in a bombshell. Like, they just get obliterated in the show. And what he does is he gets everyone in there and he starts some music and he has a birthday party for one of the players on the team. He didn't let them lose, demotivate that entire team. What he does is he brings everyone back to the table. He says, hey, yeah, we had a setback, but we still have this goal in mind. We're still going to move forward in a positive direction. That's our transformational leader. So this is kind of bonus here. I threw this slide in just because I think it's kind of funny. But there's also characters in the show that kind of perfectly summarize our emerging workforce. So our emerging workforce are these 20-somethings, right? Our Gen Zs. They're typically kind of the younger demographic. I was born in '84, so I'm an old millennial, but on the tail end of that generation is our younger millennials, or our Gen Zs. And the Gen Zs, from what we know about them, is they're deeply motivated through this idea of having an experience, and ideally a positive experience. And so when we talk about what our 20-somethings are looking for in the workplace, they're looking for that experience. And I'll argue with you all day long that EMS provides that experience. This is a cool job. Remember, this is where I'm coming from. It's fun to do. We get to go fast in the big white box with the lights on. I don't know if you guys call them boxes in North Dakota. That's what we call them on the West Coast. But you get to have this sense of identity and adventure and all this really great stuff that comes with a role in EMS, whether you're a first responder or an EMT or a paramedic or flight paramedic. It doesn't matter. You get this incredible experience, right? And our current workforce, our emerging workforce, all the 20-somethings that we're hiring right now are looking for that experience. Now, here's the problem. When that experience isn't what they thought it was going to be or what they were told it was going to be, then they go, well, I'm just going to go somewhere else and find that experience. So they're not necessarily tied to the mission or the values of the organization. Like I told you before, I worked for a nonprofit in Southern Oregon. The nonprofit I worked for was the nation's oldest nonprofit air ambulance company. They're celebrating their 75th anniversary this year. I think that's very cool. If I were to hire 21-year-old Matt into a role and I said, hey, this company's been around for 75 years. They started by selling Boy Scouts sold memberships door to door back in the 1940s. Isn't that awesome? They'd be like, okay, yeah, can I go out and do my job? I came here to like serve my community. I came here to go run calls. I came here to do, perform amazing medicine. Can I just go do that thing? So there's kind of a disconnect. We're both looking for the same thing. We're both looking for an experience, a positive experience, ideally, but it looks very different from my lens versus their lens. And so in our television show, our emerging workforce can be perfectly summarized by this guy. This is Jamie. Jamie's kind of the rock star player of the team, right? He's the one who goes out there. He's the best player on the team. He single-handedly wins games. He's the one that shows up, and when he shows up, he does amazing work. And if you watch the show, when Jamie's experience isn't what he thinks it should be, he changes teams and he leaves to go somewhere else. And when that experience isn't what he wants it to be, he comes back thinking it's going to be better with the team that he started with. He's arrogant, he's cocky, he's tough to deal with. He's psychologically also kind of healthy. In the first episode, there's some sort of kind of hypothetical conversation of, would you rather be a lion or a panda? And Jamie kind of famously says, I'm me, why would I want to be anything other than me? So he kind of has this this psychologically healthy component, excuse me, but he's also relatively immature, and he's just chasing this idea of having a positive experience. I just thought that was kind of fun, and I wanted to throw that in. So when we talk about our leadership styles, specifically our 3 modern leadership styles, which one's best, right? Should we be saying that all of us should be servant leaders? Are all of us needing to be transformational leaders or transactional leaders? And what I'll tell you is that there really is no answer. Now, if you want to find an answer to this, you can say, is transformational leadership the best? And you can Google that, right? And you'll find the answer, yes, of course. Is servant leadership the best model of leadership? Yes, and you'll find 100 articles surrounding it. But if you dig into the science, you dig into the research, remember, leadership is the art and science of influencing people. If you dig into the science, you'll find that there is no one more effective leadership style. What does make these effective is this idea of an X factor. And so what this X factor is this idea of emotional intelligence. And so this is where we kind of go from the basic concepts to maybe a little bit more advanced to now kind of this, what is the thing that makes a good leader? And so there's been a significant amount of research surrounding emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, also called EQ, is something that you can build and grow over time. So you kind of leverage that neuroplasticity that all of us have innate in our bodies and our brains. And we're going to leverage that to grow ourselves in an emotional context. This is a quote from Daniel Goleman. In the first article he wrote with HBR surrounding emotional intelligence, he literally wrote the book on emotional intelligence. He says, the most effective leaders are all alike in one crucial way. They all have high degrees of what has become known as emotional intelligence. So he basically says that you can have the acumen, you can have the skills, you can know how to look at a balance sheet, you can know how to balance a budget, you can be an excellent system status manager, but those are entry-level requirements for the job. The thing that separates good leaders from bad leaders is this concept of emotional intelligence, and that's been proven in the science and in the research. So how do we build that? Well, emotional intelligence is kind of broken down into 3 main categories. And if you watch the show, you'll see that emotional intelligence grows with all the characters throughout the context of the show. But there's 4 degrees of emotional intelligence, or kind of 4 elements of that. The first one in emotional intelligence is kind of managing and looking and identifying your emotions. So the first one is self-awareness. So when my boss comes to me and says, hey, you screwed up on that TPS report, the first emotion I have is probably going to be a little bit of anger, like, how dare you tell me I screwed up? But also there's probably something behind it, maybe some shame or some embarrassment, like, oh, I screwed up. I'm a professional. I take pride in the work I do. And I don't want to deliver this TPS report in a way that makes her feel dissatisfied. Okay, so I'm self-aware of my own emotion. Now, that doesn't do you any good if you don't manage that emotion. If I feel a wave of anger or frustration, and the first thing I do is I grab a tough book and I throw it against the windshield of my ambulance, I didn't do a very good job managing that emotion. So we want to identify the emotion, and then we want to manage the emotion. That's kind of the self-awareness or self-management component. And then we want to take those concepts and we want to look at other people with those concepts. So let's say I go to someone and I say, hey, you didn't get those TPS reports done. Hopefully all of you recognize the reference of TPS reports. Hopefully that joke isn't such a deep dive that none of y'all get. I can't see your faces, so I have no idea if you're laughing or enjoying the presentation or not, so I'm just going with it. But let's say I go to someone and I say, hey, you failed to do this thing. And they have that wave of emotion, and I don't recognize it. And I don't realize I embarrassed, someone that I work with or someone that works for me. And I don't have that social awareness. I'm not mastering the idea of emotional intelligence. So I want to identify my own emotion. I want to manage that emotion. I want to identify that emotion in other people. I want to be able to see what that looks like in other people, which means I have to get to know other people. I have to go and talk with other people. I have to have conversations with other people. What a concept, right? And then I want to manage that relationship. So I want to use that identification of that emotion to then build that relationship in a positive way. So let's say that same scenario, I go to someone, hey, you failed to get this report done. And they have this wave of embarrassment and then ultimately an anger response from them. They go, hey, listen, I can see you're angry. I want to recognize that my goal is not to make you upset. I can see that you are frustrated from this. That's okay. Just if you can, why don't you give me a timeline of when you think you're going to have this done, and then we'll move forward in a positive direction. I was able to identify that emotion, speak to that emotion, and then set some goals for building that relationship. Now, what's that person going to do? They're going to be like, oh, Philbrick sees me. He recognizes what's going on with me. It's going to foster some sort of a connection, and it's going to kind of build that metric of trust between me and that person, and it's only going to improve our relationship, right? So those are kind of the four realms, the four elements of emotional intelligence. So we're coming towards the end. I kind of promised I would only talk for about 45 minutes and then give plenty of time for questions, and we're kind of around that mark. And so this is all really great practical stuff, but how do we go from practical to tactical? How do we take these concepts and these ideas, and how do we dilute them down into something that I can literally do today? Like, I could leave this conversation, and if all of you were to do this, I'm looking, there's 30 people on the call. If you were to, all 30 of you were to sit here and go, okay, I'm gonna spend 5 minutes after this presentation, and I'm gonna think to myself, there's kind of this two-step process that I created for this presentation. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna identify my leadership style. So what do I do currently? Am I that transactional leader? Yes, no. Am I a transformational leader? Am I a servant leader? Maybe I'm a trait theory type of a leader, and I just believe that I should be here because, listen, I've read all the books. I know how to tell a funny joke and tell a funny story. I can publicly speak. I'm naturally, it should be the job. Whatever that is, that's okay. But self-identify what you are. Write that down. And then spend a little bit of time thinking about which type of leader would you like to be? Do you want to be the transactional leader that is binary or black and white, that doesn't function in the gray? And EMS is a world of gray, right? We are constantly thrown into scenarios that we've never been in before, and we have to manage those. So if that's the type of leader you want to be, just recognize, oh, this might be kind of more difficult. Maybe you want to be the servant leader. Maybe you're the one who wants to lace up your boots and go jump on a rig and run some calls. Maybe you're the one who wants to talk shop with people around a coffee maker. Maybe you're the one who wants to put people first. Maybe you're that servant leader. Maybe you're the transformational leader. You want to inspire people towards a direction. Maybe you're in a position in the company where the other two don't fit, and a transformational leader is what's required in your current position within your organization. All those are fine, but identify which one you are and which one you want to be, and then focus on that gap. I threw in mind the gap because anyone that's been to England, you see those mind the gap signs everywhere. Sorry, that's a deep cut on a stupid joke. But you want to mind the gap. You want to pay attention to that area in the middle. Where am I now? Where do I want to go? And what steps can I take to do that? And building that skill set, let's say you desire to be a transformational leader, spend some time researching it. Watch some YouTube videos, listen to some podcasts, read some articles, whatever that looks like to you. Just be like, all right, this is what I want to be. Let me grow in that direction. Let me at least fall forward in that direction. And then step two is building on that emotional intelligence. So that emotional intelligence is really, honestly, it's very, very simple to do. When you get a wave of emotion, identify what that emotion is and then manage it, right? So something today is probably going to irritate you. It may even piss you off. When that happens, don't have a response. Be like, huh, that made me a little upset. I wonder why. Approach it with a sense of curiosity. And then from there, you'll see that in someone else. That may happen at work, that may happen at home, that may be happening with me right now. They're like, hey, I logged into this thing and I was supposed to be learning about Leadership 2.0 and all this guy did was talk about Ted Lasso. Okay, identify that emotion in yourself and then look for that emotion in other people. Or when someone approaches you, look for that emotion in other people and then do your best to kind of build on that relationship. One of the ways that I do that is I approach those conversations with a sense of curiosity. So this honestly is the kind of the tactical part of it. I do this all the time. I practice this with my kids literally every day. I mentioned I have a 7-year-old son, actually, he's not 6, he's 7 years old, and I have a 9-year-old daughter. Anyone who has a 9-year-old or preteen kid knows that there's a lot of emotions. And so there are literally 100 times a day I have an opportunity to approach those intense emotional responses with a sense of curiosity. And I go, and my daughter has something going on, and I go, hey, what's going on right now? Like, what are you feeling? Huh, well, why are you feeling that way? Interesting. Is there something that I did or something that happened that made you feel that way? What's going on inside your body right now? Are you like out of breath? Do you feel your heart beating fast? Like, and I just ask questions with the idea of wanting to learn more about what's going on with that person. In this case, it's my daughter, right? I want to learn more about what's going on with her. I want to approach those with a sense of curiosity. Doesn't have to be this long, deep, intense conversation. This can happen in 10 seconds or less. And you can do this with your staff, you can do this with your peers, you can do this with your subordinate, your superiors at your organizations. So you'll be able to kind of go into those conversations and just ask questions, approach with a sense of curiosity, approach with the idea that I don't know everything and I'm just trying to learn a little bit more about what's going on here. And those are kind of the two basic steps to start heading in the right direction with identifying what your leadership philosophy is, and then building that X factor of the thing that makes you special, the thing that makes you a great leader, that emotional intelligence. You don't have to know everything, right? Famously in the television show, Ted says, you could fill up 2 internets with what I don't know. And that's true. That's true for all of us. Anyone that comes to you and says they have a 10-step process, buy my app, pay for my training, they don't have the answer, right? This is a no guru zone. So identifying that there's a lot that you don't know, but heading in the direction of learning more is kind of pretty critically key for being a good leader. And then the other quote that I really like from the show is, he says, be curious and not judgmental. I think that's incredible advice for us as we grow our leadership muscles. So with that, we're on the last slide. Please enjoy this adorable picture of my kid. This is my son, Luke. He has EMS in his blood. Every ambulance we see, he has to take a picture next to or climb in, which is really scary because he knows how to operate all the code 3 lights and sirens in it. Luke was, my wife is also a paramedic. She went into labor, her water broke literally at our EMS week barbecue back in 2016, and then Luke was born during EMS week. So that's my EMS kid there. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed. Appreciate your time. Yeah, and that's QR code there is just if you need to find me on social media or anything like that. So with that, Lynn, I talked too much. I only left 8 minutes. PJ, hey, I didn't see anyone's faces, so I have no idea if anyone enjoyed the presentation or not.
Well, I enjoyed it greatly. I learned some new things and some kind of refreshed some others, and now can take an approach on kind of getting back into leadership versus management. So I think Corey is the only one that's able to see any questions in the chat. But again, if you have any questions for Matt, put them in the chat. And then if you think of something later, Matt's QR code is right there, or you can get a hold of myself or Corey or Lynn or Tom or Carrie, and we can get those questions shipped off to Matt as well. So again, thank you. That was an excellent presentation, and thank you for making a slide deck just for us. I think it went really well. You did a great job.
Thanks.
I would suggest using it again. And for the record, I have not seen Ted Lasso, but now I'm going to. So you might make a fan out of me.
All right.
All right. So let's see here. Corey, do you see any questions in the chat? If she can hear me.
Nope, I have no questions. I have a lot of thank yous and yeah, and something about a red stapler on a desk.
Red stapler on a desk. That must be a Ted Lasso thing.
That's a TPS report reference. So, well, listen,
Greg Holmes is shocked that you haven't watched Ted Lasso.
Oh, I'm sorry. For all those of you that are still on, Corey's going to put up a poll here really quick. It'll just take you a couple of seconds. Actually, there's going to be 2 of them that we're looking to see if there's any better times for us to have these service leader meetings. So she'll put that up now. And then another one after that in regards to our management conference coming up. Looking to change a little bit of the format, which is basically kind of like what you did today for us, Matt, talking about leadership one day and management the next, and then how does that kind of come together? Because again, many of us in EMS are leaders and managers and workers, so we take on all of those tasks. And what I thought was very interesting when you were talking about the great man theory and the trait theory is, many of us that were put into leadership were put in because of the great man, or because somebody's seen some trait, so put in for that trait theory. Not always necessarily because we're raising our hand because we feel we have those traits or that we're like born into it, but someone just says, oh, you're next in line because you've been here the longest, so now here you go, you're the great man. Or you're really organized, so that's a good trait, now you should be a leader. So many of us didn't choose it, so now that we're in it, we're trying to be great leaders.
Love it.
So I don't know, Corey, did you get those polls up or is it not working? Oh, there it is. So best time to have the management conference, which month? Take a few seconds to do that. And Corey, I can't remember, when did we have it last year? What month was that?
We had it in March, and in the past we've had it in February, but we want to try to get as many, and so whenever, and then we'll do a one to see when the best time a service leader will be. Meetings
Right,
are.
and so while Corey gets that next poll up, just wanted to also let you service leaders know that we use an app called Basecamp, and in that app, many leaders ask questions, share information, and so like for instance, someone was looking for a weather algorithm or when we should or how we should communicate the inability to transport somebody in the winter because of adverse weather conditions. Lots of questions about different types of schedules, pay, sharing policies or procedures. And if you're not in that Basecamp group, you can email Lindsay Narlock or even Corey or myself, and we can get you into that Basecamp app. And it's just a great way to share information and ask questions to fellow service leaders. And I see Corey has that next poll up. What is the best time to have quarterly service meetings? So that would be the meeting that we're on today. We want to continue to have those. And again, if you have any suggestions on things to talk about, feel free to email us or call us or text us with your suggestions. Lindsay, is there anything else on Basecamp that you can think of? I don't even remember how many we have on there right now, but there's a pretty good amount and we're building more and more, which again, just helps you not have to create the wheel or recreate the wheel as a service leader if you're looking for a new policy, procedure, guideline, any of those types of things.
No, I think other than like there's some questions about like equipment or like hemostatic gauze is on here, call schedules, recruitment, retention, driver policies, winter transport decision, MCI task cards. And then we've had kind of rural EMS counts learning. So we just talk about kind of what people have noticed as they run through those reports in their service.
Awesome, thank you, Lindsay. So I think, Corey, did we get our polls completed?
Yes, we did. Thank you so much for giving me I always want to know what you guys are thinking before we start planning. So we appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you. Again, Matt, thank you. I'm going to take your assignments and I'm going to work on those. I'm going to go through them today while I'm in the air. An interesting kind of segue that I thought was interesting was your talk on emotional intelligence. And as soon as you started talking about it, my brain went to everyone else, like trying to figure out, where people are, meeting them where they are, those types of things. And then I kind of thought back, I think that I need to work on my own emotional intelligence and figure that out and be aware of that. And I think, that is potentially that step one into that mental fitness, is just kind of seeing where are you and meeting yourself where you're at. So I'm going to take that as a task as well, to kind of like tune into my own emotional intelligence. And I kind of task that out to everyone that's on the call today as well. It's kind of like taking your own inventory, right? Just kind of figuring out where are you, what are you feeling? And when I have a reaction, why am I having that? So I think we can't do it well for others if we can't do it well for ourselves. So thank you again, Matt. And do you have anything else for us?
No, listen, thanks so much for the time. I just, it's been a real pleasure. Love working with these teams. Really enjoyed heading out to Dickinson and Jamestown, and just love meeting the people. And I learned about North Dakota Nice. I brought that home and I shared that with my family. So you guys have kind of rocked my world, and I appreciate you folks out there.
Awesome. And we look forward to having you back in North Dakota, probably when there's a few feet of snow on the ground, potentially, but
Perfect.
We'll see you soon. And thank you everyone for being on the call today. Watch your emails for your LCCR credits that'll be coming from the association. So with that, have a great rest of the week, and we will talk soon.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
Matt.